Siem heiska kunis asla ties nat siem eats us quilanan tlitsa straight siem. At this time we're going to step forward with the Blackhawk Singers escort our Chiwaltanat kunis asla ties nat siem.
Anak tato na kwelna seriously one pump. Just before it can see
Look high school siem kunis athletes haha tiwi ties net siem Maqualia siem high school siem. Siem Sweltenot, our Rena priest, has just been escorted in by our Blackhawk Singers siem. At this time, we're going to step forward and go along. There's an introduction of Karine Hennen, CM. Karine Hennen, Executive Director of the Washington State Arts Commission, CM.
It is our great pleasure to welcome you to this very special event as we recognize and welcome Rena Priest as our state's 6th Poet Laureate.
And on a sadder note, tonight is also a time to say a fond farewell to Claudia Castro Luna, our 5th and most recent laureate, as she passes the laurel from her hands to Rena's. Now, the passing of an actual laurel branch picked from the same laurel bush each time has been a tradition since the Poet Laureate program started in Washington State.
The State Poet Laureate program is a joint program of ArtSwa and Humanities Washington. Each laureate is appointed by the governor, in this case, Governor Inslee. The appointment follows an exhaustive, thorough, and careful search process orchestrated by our 2 organizations, resulting in a recommendation to the governor and subsequent appointment of a very special poet to the position of State Poet Laureate.
The search process for a State Poet Laureate happens every 2 years. The process welcomes broad input and participation by poets, writers, and the poetry and literary communities, by the presenting community, the libraries, the bookstores, theaters, and venues of all shapes and sizes in all corners of our state, and by other key stakeholders. And the emphasis is on a process that is inclusive, equitable, and fair-minded.
Tonight, we celebrate Rena Priest's appointment, and Humanities Washington and ArtSwa are honored to co-host this celebration with the Lummi Nation and the Washington Center for the Book.
Now, Governor Inslee proclaimed April as National Poetry Month in the state of Washington, and here is a portion from that proclamation. Whereas Washington State values the importance of poetry to the culture and heritage of our state, and whereas Rena Priest, a member of the Lummi Nation, has been appointed the 6th State Poet Laureate by the governor, and whereas Rena, our state's first Native American Poet Laureate, will help promote the value of poetry to all cultures and diverse communities of the state. Now, therefore, I, J. Inslee, Governor of the state of Washington, do hereby proclaim April the 2021 to be Poetry Month.
Now, we ask that you sit back and enjoy the festivities with us as we honor past Poets Laureate and our newest State Laureate, Rena Priest, with poetry, speech, and song. We will start with a message from our absent but still very much appreciated first Poet Laureate, Sam Green, and then Kathleen Flanagan, our second Poet Laureate, will follow Sam.
Rena, greetings from sunny Waldron Island. I've been sitting at my desk looking out at the flowering currant bush just beyond the front deck, thinking about you and remembering that little Robert Sons poem. It's been a busy day. First, one hummingbird, then another. You're only about 20 miles from me as the hummingbird flies, but as they sometimes say in Ireland, it's not so easy to get there from here. Way back in 2007, after the news release naming me as the first Poet Laureate after the passage of House Bill number 1279, I gave a reading at Seattle's Open Books from my newly published collection, The Grace of Necessity. In their introduction, John Marshall and Christine Deeville surprised me by announcing not only the laureateship, but also that they were presenting me with a laurel wreath. It's always been hard for me to be the center of attention anyway, but being the recipient of a laurel wreath seemed so over the top that I was embarrassed. But then they did a brilliant thing. They declared that they were passing the wreath up to me from the back rows of the audience, and they asked each person present to touch it as it went forward. Not as an act of homage, but as a blessing, a deputation. By the time the wreath reached me, it was less an accolade than a reminder that the laureateship was a service position, that it was about other poets, lovers, and potential lovers of poems, and not about me, that I would be the custodian and advocate of that audience's hopes for what might come of having a spokesperson represent them. Throughout my entire term, I carried leaves from that wreath with me at all times, occasionally rubbing them between thumb and forefinger for luck, until by the end of my term, I had only fragments left. May your own virtual wreath bring you such comfort, especially when the hours on the road add up to more than hours at home, when you wake in a motel in another part of the state and wonder, just for a moment, where the heck you are, when you begin wishing for the simplest leftovers from your own kitchen instead of another meal in another restaurant with a local with a sense of humor, but mostly when you experience each day what a blessing it is to be able to share with so many the love we have for this flexible, muscular, indomitable thing we call poetry. Thank you for stepping up, Rena. Welcome to the struggle.
I sure wish you could be here tonight, but you're definitely here in spirit. My name is Kathleen Flanagan, and I served as Washington State Poet Laureate from 2012 to 2014. And I wanted to say that I met Rena first through her poems and only later in person. So I wanted to recognize that moment of meeting her in print by reading one of Rena's poems. This is a poem she wrote for the Jack Straw Writers Program, which is where our paths crossed a couple of years ago for the first time. And I chose this poem in part because it has a lot of the hallmarks of a Rena Priest poem. It has a lot of smarts, and it has some humor. It has an octopus. It has a line from National Geographic magazine. And it uses invented form. She's taken the sonnet and cut off the last 6 lines in a series of 4 linked poems. And then at the end, she includes a volta and then makes reference to it inside the poem. So it's just filled with her genius and her sounds. So I wanted to share this with you. It's called Shimmy at the Volta. 1. Is it comforting to be told that we are not alone? Do you assume whatever is with us loves us? Perhaps the being who is busy conjuring clouds is watching over us now. 2. Does it unsettle you to be told that we are not alone? Are you made leery by a lack of backstory? Who's out there? Perhaps intelligent aliens with bony eyelids and starlit, iridescent eyes stare. 3. Of course, we are not alone. We have our own strange reflections, like wings of glass fluttering in a maze of mirrors, perhaps evolved to crack so we can embark, make breakthroughs. 4. We are alone. If you believe the universe is one big thing, which it is, in the same way an octopus has one big brain and another in each leg. Perhaps we are alone. Shall we move joyfully and see if anyone joins to have a shimmy? 5. At the volta, have a shimmy and another in each leg. Make breakthroughs. In a maze of mirrors, eyes stare. Who's in there? Watching us? Does it love us? Love that. I have two pieces of advice. The first is, assuming you're eventually going to get on the road, Rena, I suggest you start budgeting for a replacement car for the one that you're going to run into the road, and I mean run into the ground. I don't mean anything bad by that. I just mean you're going to wear it out. And then the other piece of advice is that on some beautiful October morning, you should get up and out early, take Highway 2 up Stevens Pass, past the yellow leaves and the Skycomish River, maybe get out around Waterville, do a little Poet Laureate work, then get back in the car and drive all afternoon into the evening along Highway 2 through the brown and the gold and the blue, and feel like you're the only person in the whole wide world, and just drive to the edge of Washington. And then remember that day as long as you live. Or if not that day, then you're going to remember some other trip. I am so happy for you. I can't wait to see what you do with your position. And I just celebrate you. And I'm going to take the magical Laurel that is the one that we've all had from the same bush, and I'm going to pass this to the magnificent Elizabeth Austin.
Thank you, Kathleen. I had the good fortune to serve as the third Poet Laureate from 2014 to 2016. Rena, congratulations. Washington is just so fortunate that you are the one who stepped forward for this role, especially right now, for all the reasons that Kathleen spoke to and that beautiful poem that Kathleen shared with us. My fervent wish for you, Rena, is that you'll be able to travel freely around our state soon. Partly because, as you know, it's beautiful, but also because the libraries in our state are one of the great treasures of Washington, and I hope you get to visit as many of them all over as you possibly can. And my one piece of advice that I will give you is to please pop a sleeping bag into the trunk of your car, because you never know when you might need it to stay warm, and just knowing that you have it will hopefully ease any travel anxiety. So that's my advice for you. I'll also just say that one of the aspects of the Poet Laureate job that I found particularly stimulating and challenging was writing commissioned poems, poems that organizations will ask you to write to help them mark a particular event or to create ceremony for something. And so tonight I wanted to share a poem that was commissioned by Seattle Children's Hospital for its annual memorial service. In a year when our connections, when the durability of our connections have been so tested and far too many have been lost, it still feels relevant. This is called Calling Out the Names. Stripped of leaves, each limb exposed, maple remembers the whoosh of branches, lush with wind and shade. Even frozen solid or emptied by drought, river remembers flood banks, the pulse of current. Grain in the loaf remembers field. Scar remembers knife, but also suture and the hand that bandaged. Bed recalls absent sleeper, damp breath on the pillow. Brush stilled on the dresser remembers knots and what followed the untangling. Honey remembers hive, bee, and blossom. Salmon tastes home in the scent of its birth stream. Sand remembers shell, gravel the granite cliff, lung, breath throat, song, and I remember you. Rena, blessings for your journey and gratitude to you for taking up this good work. And so now it's my great pleasure to introduce Todd Marshall, professor of English at Gonzaga University. And during Todd's tenure, he put out a statewide call for poems and edited this beautiful anthology of Washington Voices, WA 129. Todd, I'm officially passing the laurel to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I actually have a copy of that book in front of me that was bound by Sam Green. And so there's a nice connection back to Sam. My name is Todd Marshall, and I served as the 4th Washington State Poet Laureate from 2016 to 2018. I had the good fortune of coming after Sam and Kathleen and Elizabeth, and I really can't emphasize that enough and tie that into my advice to you, Rena. People have driven on these roads before. People have explored parts of the state, and we all would love to help you in any way that we can. Help you to make connections, help you to find the best restaurants and the places that you can get a coffee when you're traveling. And so please reach out to us. I think that it's important for me to point out that the state stretches a good number of miles after the Cascade Mountains. And I think that Kathleen was perhaps pointing toward this in her talking about the long drive after you come down on Highway 2. From Ellensburg East, it's a couple hundred more miles before you get to that awful place that is Idaho. And there are so many wonderful small towns and so many wonderful people in those small towns. I suspected that Elizabeth was going to mention librarians. That was one of the, in our libraries, that was one of the things that she mentioned to me as I started this journey. And so Rena, I want to emphasize that resource to you. We have so many wonderful libraries and just absolutely beautiful librarians in our state, beautiful of spirit. I was always astounded at the help that librarians sent my way. And they love to hear from poets, and they love to help in any way they can. I thought I might tell a short story about one encounter with a librarian that maybe took a little bit of a left turn as a way to bridge to the last piece of advice that I might share. I was in Soap Lake, a stunning small town north of Moses Lake, and I'd been invited there to do a talk at the small library in town. The librarian, because she was so gracious, panicked about my visit, and she was worried that an audience large enough would not show. She didn't need to worry about that. I think that any size audience for poetry is wonderful, and all of us became accustomed to crowds of 3 and crowds of a few hundred. But she panicked and reached out to the local high school and asked if my event could happen there in the gymnasium at the end of the day. And she didn't mention it to me. And so I arrived in Soap Lake and was shuffled over to the gymnasium, where several hundred pretty rowdy high school students were waiting in the bleachers to see what on earth this poet guy had to offer. I was a little bit terrified, a lot scrambling as to what I might do, and really frightened by the microphone that was set up, looking very lonely in front of those bleachers that normally look out at a basketball team or a volleyball game. And so I walked over to the microphone and had the good fortune of one of the students miskicking a soccer ball and having it coming my way. I have some skills, and so I juggled it on my shoulders a couple times, balanced it on my head like a seal, and got all of about 15 minutes of cred from the students. The program, unfortunately, was 45 minutes long, and so it ended up being a pretty challenging afternoon. But but the advice that I would take from that and convey to you, Rena, is flexibility and improvisation are going to be your wonderful tools. And I know from your poetry that you're more than willing to go in wild, imaginative directions. And so use that spirit as you engage in this service for the state. I'm going to pass the laurel now to Claudia Castro Luna, the person who followed me in this position. And I should say about Claudia, her literary accomplishments are many, and her service to poetry in this state is really unparalleled. Earlier, someone had mentioned that she's been in a civic poet role for about 6 years, which is absolutely stunning to me. I know her as the amazing, generous spirit who, even after I had passed on the laureateship to her and was no longer on the road all the time, sent me care packages and these gestures of kindness that showed what a profound spirit Claudia is. So I'm going to pass the laurel this way and invite you to listen to Claudia Castro Luna.
Thank you so much, Todd, for your kind words. And to everyone, it's an amazing gathering. It's really listening to you all, thinking of what I have prepared some remarks and thinking, oh, it comes together how all of us have been involved in this job that Rena is about to take. Congratulations, Rena, on becoming the 6th Poet Laureate of Washington State. I hope that you could sense across the miles the joy of so many of us as you assumed the office. I did want to start with this. Buenas noches. Good evening, everyone. My name, as Todd said, is Claudia Castro Luna, and I had the honor of serving as the 5th Poet Laureate of the state, a role which changed my life completely. It is an extraordinary time of service and discovery of self, of landscape and community. As I conclude my term, one word outweighs all others: gratitude. This program is successful because of the many people and agencies across the state that support it. From the San Juan Islands to Medellin Falls in the northeast corner of the state, 12 miles short of Canada, from Assateague to Walla Walla to Vancouver, and from White Salmon to Clallam Bay, our state libraries and librarians, as Elizabeth mentioned, are an integral part of the success of the Poet Laureate program. My deepest gratitude to them and to the Washington Center for the book. Todd, as you were recounting that story about Soap Lake, I was thinking of my experience in Medellin Falls, where Medellin Falls is a very small town in the northeast, the most northern eastern corner of the state. And the librarian, she'd gather people, we had a reading, and then she brought us into a separate room of the library where she had all sorts of cookies and sweets and tea and juice for us to have community. And that happened again and again. The librarians would go out of their way to create community after the reading. It's really, and we do have, we're blessed to have such an amazing network of libraries and librarians. But for a poet laureate, libraries are certainly a cornerstone, but there's many other people that play a role in sustaining and helping the person who's in the position. And so I wanted to mention a few people who hold a special place in my heart for the way in which they took me in and brought me into their communities. Dan Lamberton and Linda Andrews in Walla Walla, Gwendolyn Morgan, who's the former Poet Laureate of Clark County, and Christopher Luna in Vancouver, Jane Hodges in Mineral, which is in Lewis County, Luther Allen and Judy Kleinberg in Bellingham, Linda Brown Ed Stower and Mark Fusey in Yakima, Alma Chacon of the organization Café in Wenatchee, Joyce Weir of Create in Newport, Dennis Held in Spokane, Sarah Kavanaugh, Bruce Rutledge, and Jenny Wilkson in Seattle and the Seattle School of Visual Concepts. I want to offer gratitude to Greg Woolston and Amrita Mazumdar and Wolf Schaff, the team that helped me design and implement the digital maps and projects I created and which will live on for all of us. The poetic grid map of Washington State now has recordings of poets across the state reading their own poems. And it's just a wonderful thing to hear these poets voicing their poems. I want to thank so many organizations that are the lifeblood of our poetry communities in the state: the Olympia Poetry Network, Seattle Escribe, Yakima Coffee House Poets, Methel Arts, Ellensburg Poetry Prowl, Get Lit in Spokane, Litfuse in Tieton, the Skagit Poetry Festival, the Chuckanut Writers Conference, Centrum, and the Maryhill Museum. These were all places where I returned sometimes more than once to be in community with others. And to all who opened their doors to me, schools, colleges, universities, community centers, bookstores, all the people who played part in this ecosystem, this poetry ecosystem that we have in Washington State. And to all my fellow poets who read with me this past amazing 3 years. To the Academy of American Poets, whose fellowship helped me undertake the project One River, Many Voices, and to the poets who helped me execute it: Derek Sheffield, Gwendolyn Morgan, Tyrone Ross Thompson, Maureen McQuarrie, Cindy Williams Gutierrez, and Lynn Rigney Schott. To the Yakima Nation, the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, to the Tulalip Tribes and the Wanapum Heritage Center who welcomed me into their space, and to the Duwamish people on whose unceded lands I reside. To my colleagues, previous Poets Laureate, all of us who are here gathered today, thank you for your encouragement and your friendship this past years as I served my term. And I want to say to you, Rena, you could count on each of us. Every single one of the poets who came before me, Kathleen, Todd, Elizabeth, everybody was willing to, and Sam as well, offer me their support whenever I needed it. And I want to extend that to you. And I know that they will feel the same way if you were to reach out to them. But I want to especially thank Todd Marshall, who is my predecessor, who was unwavering in his support during my tenure and who taught me so much about being a poet in the world. To Karen Hannan and Julie Ziegler, the directors of the Arts Commission of Washington State and Humanities Washington, respectively, and to their amazing staffs for managing all aspects of the Poet Laureate program. Rena, you will get to know them very well, as we all have. And finally, I want to thank my friends and family, to my husband, Sean Heron, and my children, Amalia, Beva, and Lucas, for sustaining me, caring for me, and offering me their love. There were moments, many moments actually, when I was away from home on the road. I remember sitting down with my son, Lucas, when he turned 13, about a week before his birthday was coming up. And I told him that I was going to miss it because I was going to be on the road. There was a scheduling issue that this was the only time this event could happen. And he very kindly listened to me and understood why, that we would celebrate his day on another day. So to all of you and to all those who I don't have space to mention, thank you. Gracias, muchísimas gracias for all your support these past 3 years. I would like to close also by reading a very short poem. I think Kathleen or was it Elizabeth who mentioned there are occasions when the laureate is asked to write a poem for that occasion. And sometimes it's quite scary because you have to do it on a short notice, or you're writing about something you're not familiar with, but that is part of the job. So today I wrote a poem for this occasion, for this day. It's a short poem and it's titled For Rena. Daughter of Lumi, of water, of blazing mountain, in the time of now, for the time of word, song, bloom that is to come, rainbow blessings, sun, moon blessings today. And so, Rena, I also have a small branch from the same laurel bush, and I have it here, and I will pass it to you. Congratulations, and I look forward to watching your laureateship unfold.
Heiska McQuelliats Anglets Squal Tias Natsium. Heiska to Corinne and Julie Ziegler. Siam Itza McQuellia to Anglets Snup Tias Natsium. At this time, we'd like to introduce Suwaltanat, our Rena priest tonight, Siam. She is going to say a few words to everybody tonight, Siam.
Haishka. Aitsquile, Siam, Nostalgia, Ohelix and Quenis Natacha Latiacaius, Safaltanat Sanasnat Chochlamisan. I'm so very proud to be here with you here today in my community celebrating this honor. My heart is just really full with gratitude to be given this opportunity to carry this work forward for the next 2 years. There have been so many people who have been with me along this path, and I'm thankful for all the gifts that I've been given through poetry and writing over the years. There have been many times when I've wondered why I do this work, and there have been many, many more where I feel lucky beyond words to have poetry in my life. There is a line by Rumi that I have often turned to during hard times. He says, "There is a secret medicine given only to those who hurt so hard they can't hope. The hopers would feel slighted if they knew. For me, this secret medicine is poetry, and not only poetry, but poets. The best gift I've been given on this path is the amazing community of poets who I've been fortunate to meet along the way. There are so many. I wrote my first poem in the 2nd grade on a little paper cloud. It was called Spring. Then years went by, many of which didn't include a significant role for poetry in my life. And then I remember when I changed my major in undergrad from theater to English. The first class I took was Jim Bertolino's English 101, or Poetry 101, excuse me. And I remember on the first day of class feeling like I'd been clicked in, like I'd found my people again. He gave us an assignment to go for a walk around the humanities building and find an object, some small object that we could carry back with us without vandalizing anything. We were to carry it back and write a poem about a person we knew using only the characteristics of the found object to describe them. I found a used dryer sheet. The poem I wrote was titled Dryer Sheet Jeremy. Along the way, when I would tell people what I was studying in college and I'd say creative writing, they'd say, "What are you going to do with that degree?" And later on, I learned that the Chilean poet Pablo Neruda said that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. So here I am, an unacknowledged legislator of the world with all you other poets, and honored to be moving into this new phase of my journey. Poetry has taken me to so many places. I did my graduate program in New York at Sarah Lawrence College, and I've done residencies at a repurposed elementary school in Mineral, Washington, a castle in Scotland, and an adorable cottage on Whidbey Island. In all of these adventures, I've had my spirit lifted, filled to the brim with happiness by the wonderful people I've met. And now I get to do this important and soul-satisfying work of stewarding poetry as the Poet Laureate of Washington State. The tradition of Poet Laureate dates back to the ancient Greeks who crowned heroes and poets with laurel leaves as a mark of honor and distinction. I'm honored to be a part of this ancient tradition and happy to be given this opportunity to do this work. Most of all, I'm looking forward to the new poets I will meet, as well as joining old friends in celebration of our beloved art. I have brought 3 poems to share with you. The first 2 look at the theme of solastalgia, which is a neologism that describes a form of emotional or existential distress caused by environmental change. The third is a poem celebrating discourse in a healthy democracy, and it's the first that I've written to a particular topic in this role. This first poem is called Remembering Tata at Tamhuiksen, and Tata is a word for mother, but more like mama or mommy. And it's based on a story that my Uncle Casimir told about my grandma Rena after she came home from the cannery one day. And also my own memory of my mom coming home with fish scales all over her arms from the cannery. Remembering Tata at Tamhuiksen. A glossary of bell-related words chimes, sings, peals, tolls. It is a feeling of silver. It rings and shines at the edges. Like the scales of a fish, it flickers, tintinnabulates the signal of a charm, of magic, of a movie memory sequence. And then there is Mother, home from the cannery, covered in the scales of hundreds of gutted fish. She shimmers like a mermaid. Long day, I ask? When I lunch at noon, she replies, the sky is a polished silver spoon. By quitting time, tarnish has overtaken all signs of shine. That's how long the day is. You must have cleaned a lot of fish, I say. I think we cleaned out all of Puget Sound. There used to be gooseberries at Gooseberry Point. Now there is the cannery. Won't be long before all the fish are gone. Then the cannery will go and all we'll have is hunger and sorrow. A burden is the heaviest bell of a carillon. Its register is low. I wish I had a magic wand to chime the cheerful sound of gooseberries sprouting up out of the ground. It's funny, since I've assumed this role, or since the announcement was made that I would be appointed, I've done a lot of interviews with newspapers and radio stations, and they all want to, sometimes they'll ask, where do your poems come from? And so this poem actually came from wanting to know if there was a word for the little bell that Catholics ring to make the wine turn into blood. And I never did find out if there was a word for that bell. So if anyone knows that word, email me. Okay. And then I looked it up, and there's a glossary of bell-related words at some university, and it's really beautiful. But then the poem just grew from there. This second poem is called A Poem is a Naming Ceremony, and it's a little bit about my regret that I don't know my native language. And I remember when I was arranging for this event, I went to visit my elders to see if they would escort me, and I saw my great aunt Ernestine here. And she told me, and I didn't tell her about this poem, but she told me this story about when she was a little girl and she would go into a room and the elders would be speaking our language and they would stop. They would stop talking and they'd speak English because they didn't want the children to speak English and be hurt in school the way that they had been. And so it was like an explanation. It was a little bit of a healing for me to know that that's part of why I don't know my language. But so this poem is called A Poem as a Naming Ceremony. What has grown out of what has gone away? The clear-cut patch has grown larger on the mountain. The rivers have grown murky with timber trash, and there's enough runoff manure to grow cow corn out there on the tide flats. I don't want to think about what has gone away. I want to play and meander and forget myself until I can grow a new me in place of all this grief. Learn the language to see the cottonwood as Quayalich each, the dancing tree, the killer whale as Qualamachin, our relatives under the sea, the whole glorious landscape filled with meaning to end my grieving. When I was young, I was invited to learn Quilnuchin, the people's language, but I said no. I didn't understand. I thought I wanted to learn how to be rich. I didn't know that the only way to possess all the wealth of the world is by naming it. Here is bird song. Here is the kiss of a lover. Here is the feel of cold water at the peak of summer. I have spent my life with words, trying to name a hint of what I lost by not learning my language. Estitimson, tutatisson, estitimson. There's a writer from the from Tsleil-Waututh, and her name is Lee Miracle, and she says that our mother tongue is how we understand ourselves, our innermost feelings, and that if we don't know it, then we can't communicate with ourselves. And maybe I think that's some of why I've turned to poetry over the years, is because it allows these deeper layers of communication with my innermost self. And I just want to thank the teachers here today, the language teachers who've come to participate in this event. My speaker, my Sachs, my uncle, Patchwalis, and Smakia, Matt Warbist, also my teacher. I'm still learning. I'm doing my best. And finally, I'd like to close with a poem called The Forest for the Trees that was written on request to celebrate discourse in democracy. The forest for the trees. I have seen a tree split in two from the opposing weight of its branches. It can survive, though its heart is exposed. I have seen a country do this too. I have heard an elder say that we must be like the willow, bend not to break. I have made peace this way. If my neighbors clear-cut their trees, leaving mine defenseless, the arborist says they'll fall in the first strong wind. Together we stand. I see this now. I have seen a tree grown around a bicycle, a street sign, and a chainsaw, absorbing them like ingredients in a great melting pot. When we speak, whether or not we agree, the trees will turn the breath of our words from carbon dioxide back into air. Give us new breath for new words, new chances to listen, new chances to be heard. Because without trees, we can't have democracy. Haishka, I'm so pleased to be joining this distinguished line of Poets Laureate. And I actually have my own little story about Highway 2 and wish fulfillment. One time I was on Highway 2 after dropping my daughter off in Spokane with her grandmother over there. And I drove and drove and drove and drove and drove for a long time, and I was really bored, and I thought, gosh, I wish I had someone to talk to. And I saw these paragliders paragliding up in the sky, and then maybe about a half hour down the road, one of these paragliders was waving his arms on the roadway out in the middle of nowhere with his, parasail all packed up next to him. He said he'd drug it from the field that he'd landed in. He got blown off course, and he was just out there by himself. He said, could you please give me a ride to the next town, which happened to be Wenatchee. I said, sure. So he popped his, parasail in, and then we drove, and it was a very entertaining conversation. So, strange things out on the prairie. But hi, Ishka. Thank you.
Sie wollte not see him. Rena priest see him. I'd like to share just a little short story. We used to live in Alaska, and Rena was only this tall, and her mom dressed her in Oshkosh bagosh. And I would walk by her and I'd say, Osh, and she goes, finish it. So I had to finish Oshkosh bagosh when she was this little. But at this time, we'd like to call on Quilsamut, Angalat, Sachacha, Satiwil, Siam.
Huisje het hier een uitstrijdnis uit. Squile. Maqualia. Quasomat Senasnat. Chut Clemison. Sahanup Kusamat. Sunny Alling. Karen Williams, Senna Sosila. Sally Jack. Herman Olson, Senna Sosila. Virgil Williams, Senna Sosila. Soitsin Ohiluk Quinus Asla Atiakaias. Nuchchisin Maqualia Quinus Inatachel. Nestli Quinus Qual Aquaquino Squal. Out Sen Kachitsa Uchlimichasin. Utatisin Quinus Twinaux. Thank you for your very good work, my auntie. My name is Quasilmut. My traditional name is Quasilmut. My English name is Sadie Olson. Hello. Good day, my friends and relatives. Good day, everybody. I am from Lummi. Troy Olson, Sahanat Pasmin is my father, and Shirley Williams, Kusamat, is my mother. Karen Williams is my grandmother. Sally Jack and Herman Olson are my grandparents on my dad's side, and my grandfather is Virgil Williams. I'm happy to see all of you here today. I just wanted to say a few words. I love each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. I don't know the Lummi language and I'm still learning how to speak it. Haishka. I'm here today to represent the Swan family. We are the family of the Lanes and the Ballous, the Solomons and the Bolches, the Celestines. We come from the Swan clan. Swans are made of male and female balance, and when they fall in love for a lifetime. And I always think about that when I think about our family and us finding balance and trying to represent well in balance. I'm going to sing the Swan family song, which I heard plenty of times, and we even used to dance. Oh, 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 yeah. Kolnitsa sulalita aheya, aheya. Kolnitsa sololita aheya, haya, haya. Oh, hey, oh, 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 yeah. Quilnitsa sulalita, ah, hey, ah, sololitsa, aheya, haya, haya, oheya, dos, quaios, tasmin, hoe, dos, quaios, tasmin, hoe, dos, quaios, tasmin, hoe, dos, quaios, tasmin, hoe, oh, dos, quaios, tasmin, hoe, dos, quaios, tasmin, hoe, dos, quaios, tasmin, hoe, dos, quaios, tasmin, hoe, oh, 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 yeah, quilnitsa, sulalitsa, aheya, aheya, quilnitsa, sololitsa, aheya, haya, haya, oheya, oh, yeah, quilnitsa, sulalitsa, aheya, aheya, quilnitsa, sololitsa, aheya, haya, haya, oheya, haishka, haishka. Our Baloo family also has a canoe named Sololitsa, and we are in the works of creating Solalitsa, the male version. So remember, we come from canoe people. Haishka.
Haishka ana sequence angelas delum ties natium. Haishka sium. Sium. At this time, we'd like to hear from Deborah Lekanoff. Sium.
Hi, this is Representative Deborah Lekanoff. I represent the 40th Legislative District in Washington State's House of Representatives. Rena, from the bottom of my heart, congratulations. As I listened to these esteemed poets today, my heart was warmed. I was excited to see such a beautiful young woman such as yourself standing up and being raised and appointed by Governor Inslee to be the 6th Poet Laureate for the Washington Arts and Humanity Association. Your words are so true, and the voice you carry come from ancestors who walked before you. The words that you share, my dear young girl, are the words that will be shared with the generations that'll come after you. You have such a beautiful opportunity as you travel across Washington State. And as these poets shared with you, coming from the east to the west, Highway 2, and the different libraries that you'll visit, all I could hear in my heart and in my mind was you would be going to the Yakama Nation and visiting the library there. You'd be going to the Colville Nation and talking and sitting in their little library where their little kids are sitting. You'd be traveling to Suquamish and sitting in their little school with their little kids looking up to you and hearing your beautiful words. You would be traveling from Muckleshoot to Puyallup to Stillaguamish to Saxswaddle, over to Quinault, over to Ho, over to Macaw. You would be traveling to all of the nations in the first communities of this great state. You shared in a quote that there were 29 federally recognized tribes and over 140,000 citizens. And as you walked into your small group and settings, there are very few who looked like you, who sounded like you, that carried the very spirit that you carry, that's being blessed upon you by your people in the Lummi Nation. My young girl, you are going to grow the curiosity of my little niece sitting here listening to you and asking me, Auntie, at 6 years old, what's a poet? The spirits you will raise, the hearts you will fill, the hope you will bring to the children who look like you and I is going to be monumental for our people in this great state and across Indian country. You carry so much responsibility, my dear girl, but the teachings that come from Lummi Nation will give you strength. I hear about the care packages that you got, Todd. Your care packages are going to be full of smoked salmon, huckleberries. It's going to be filled with the cedar that your community will give you. You have a strength within you. And not knowing what to say today, this is coming from my heart. But I quickly looked up your poetry and I was so honored that I wasn't so off in my assumption, my colleagues, as you all read poetry. But Rena, you're going to bring a story and a voice that no one else will bring to Washington State. And I think Governor Inslee raised that. And there was something in a poem that I saw that just raised, it raised my heart. And it was one that you wrote called Super Sacred. And I know as a poet, I should read the whole piece because every word matters. Every sentence has a heart in it. But there's one section here, and please, I'm only going to read one poem or else I will be reading for a very long time. But your words are beautiful. In your poem, you said, here are some beads. Here are some feathers. Here's a song and a dance. What changes up the weather? Here's the requisite mention of Mother Earth and the moon. Here's the deer with a velvet hide who asks of me in his mind Indian poems. Why? You know right. Here's a sacred prayer at sunrise. Here are two eagles in flight. And here's my forgiveness. You will bring a uniqueness to Washington State. Very honored and very pleased and so very proud of you. Congratulations on behalf of the Washington State Legislature, the floor of the People's House, and from the only Native American in the state legislature, I raise my hands to you as being the only Native American and the 6th Poet Laureate. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to your family. Congratulations to the wonderful, mighty Lummi Nation. Thank you for giving me just a few minutes.
For the few words that you shared tonight, Siam. At this time, we're going to move along to the witnesses. We're going to start with the oldest one first tonight, Siam.
Thank you all for being here this evening for this wonderful, momentous day. A day to witness the legacy and the teachings of the people. We are blessed and we are honored as the indigenous people of the Laktamish territory. We thank you, my dear relative, Si Wiltonat. Thank you for doing what you do, for sharing these gifts, these magical gifts that take us to a place that we can only feel, we can dream of. You inspire us. You teach us this wonderful legacy from our ancestors, No matter where you go in this great state of Washington, you will find our people. This is our place. We have been here since time immemorial. The time is now. If not when, now. If not this, what? This is you. You get to champion these words of wisdom and share them near and far with our children, with our people, our elders, and in the company of good friends and relatives. The witness of the work today, this ceremony, is unforgettable and remarkable. We will all remember this day because we lift you up and we are with you every step of the way. We cherish you and honor you. We recognize what you are doing, and we will be with you. You will never be alone. I want to thank all of the speakers this evening, the previous poet laureates, and those that may someday be our next poet laureate. Teachings of the children right here, what you do for them. We cannot thank you enough. And thank you for sharing those beautiful poems that you shared with us this evening. We know that you have many more. But the one that touched me the most reminded me of the great words from our dearly beloved, the late Chief Salik. And I share this with you because I feel the same way. It is true we did not grow up knowing our language. And he told me, it is not your fault that you do not know your language. It is not your parents' fault. It is not your grandparents' fault. It is nobody's fault. But do the best that you can. Estitimson. Hearing those words from our late hereditary chief was powerful and liberating. But what I see in you is these gifts that you will carry on and be the example for many. So keep speaking your truth with your beautiful spirit. And thank you. And thank you, friends and family, for being here today. Haichka Siam, Siam Nisjalacha Siam.
Siam Nisjalacha, Smack it on a snap, chocolamisan. Nestli kunasangas kukuino squal, tlatsa siqueltanat, so itu skeno ait to squal, to quo. Nestli kunasangas a stilum, needs to stilum to the shapilis. My dear friends and relatives, my name is Smakia. I'm from Lummi. I've spent many years studying Kulamichasan. I've spent many years learning to play my flute. The important thing that I tell people when I'm talking is that these are the gifts. These are the gifts that come out when you share your song, when you share your dance, when you share your words. These are the gifts that come out. Sometimes we don't realize how much of a gift this really is. Sometimes we don't realize that sharing this gift is leadership. It's something that we do, and we don't think of it as leadership. The reality is, each and every one of us has that ability. Some of us, we need to search for it. Some of us, it comes out naturally. Everybody's gift is different. When I received my Indian name, they talked about this gift, that it's going to come out, it's going to present itself. And so, carrying yourself the way that you do, carrying your name in a good way, brings out these gifts. And I just have to say that I can see your gift. It's like pulling out that magic wand. Happens to be a pencil sometimes. And you're writing, you're being creative. I never really understood the importance of what was happening this evening until listening to the other poet laureates. And that responsibility that's coming forward for you. You know, it sounds like everybody has contributed in one way or another, and you know, your contribution, it's going to be a whole different perspective coming from a Native American person. Inspiration. And I believe that you are an inspiration for many, many people. And I say that because here we are. We're giving you this recognition, this honor. Somewhere in a crowded room, far, far away, somebody heard your voice. Somebody heard your words, your poetry. When your poetry is spoken, it has to be heard. Maybe not here, but needs to be heard here. And this is what I hear when I listen to the few poems that you read. Right here, that's where it hit me. And I just have to encourage you to tatas to klimichasin, to smatskin, to sislan quanquam. Continue learning the Lummi language. Stand strong. Knowing who we are as people is one of the challenges that each and every one of us face. And for us to take a stand and to step into this leadership role that you have is one of those steps, finding who you are as a person. Everybody has that drive to find out who they are. Everybody has a gift to share. And I have to say that I'm very honored to be here tonight to witness who you are as a person. And I just have to come back a little bit and say that, you know, when I visit with Rena, more or less it's conversation about, well, how do you say this? How do you say that? And how do you say this in Lummi language? And I never really knew the poet that she was, or that she is. And so it's awesome to be here, and I'm very honored. And I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be here to celebrate Sihualtana Aishkasi. Quantna eat smack yep, Heiskats anglatsum, qualtla, swoltna, tias nat siam. I'd like to thank all the speakers tonight that had a few words to share with Swalt tonight, CM. I'd like to thank all of you for being here to witness this work that the family had on their mind. And at this time, I believe we have the Blackhawk Singers. They're going to step forward again. The Angelets, the Kachats, the Stelem, Tiwil, Eid, Anach, Tias Nat, CM.